All right, for arpeggios, pretty short videos. I'd encourage you to watch them, but we talk about engagement. When you think about it, arpeggios are kind of built off what comes before. I like doing chords before arpeggios because I think chords are a simpler motion and you can refine a lot of things. To Rene's point, if you start with arpeggios, you're going to develop more independence. I don't think the sky is going to fall. I'll put it to you like this. Rene's opinion is start with arpeggios so you can develop control and independence of the fingers. My opinion is that you develop your ability to produce sound and engagement. In other words, the same thing that he's trying to get you to benefit from of developing coordination and independence of the fingers also makes it more complicated. So for me, and this helped me out a lot, again, Rene's the virtuoso, by all means, take his opinion if you prefer it, but I preferred really mastering, or I don't want to say master, but really refining my technique through chords first, both 3 and 4 note, and kind of experimenting with just the fingers, and then engagement, and also using limb support, like using the elbow or using the wrist and that opening the jar motion, and then going to arpeggios and trying to get that same depth, volume of sound and quality of tone, but with individual fingers. Because it's a simpler motion. Take my opinion or leave it. That is up to you. Rene talks about not lifting, I'm gonna have to lean back, like not lifting up the shoulder during arpeggios or when you're engaged. He talks about full planting, where you everything's planted, then you play the chord, and then sequential planting, where it's A, then plant M, M, then plant I then plant P. You wanna practice both. Just like with intervals, there's a positioning issue. So you want to set it up so that you're not, let me put it to you like this. If you use the shoulder and arm joint to position so that your index is here, and then you try to play here, you're gonna have to extend the index pretty far, and then it's gonna be out. Whereas if you shift the whole hand so that with the shoulder to arm joint, so that when you pluck and relax, you're just right above the string you wanna play, you're in a more optimal playing position. That's a pretty key concept, that idea that you want, just like with the intervals where you wouldn't want to play, you wouldn't want to be set up like this and then try to play with the G string. You wouldn't want to be set up with your shoulder to arm joint for the A string with the index finger and try to play the G string. You don't want to do that with arpeggios either. You want to set it up so that when you pluck with I, you're relaxed right above the string you want to play, in this case the G string, and are ready to go. The other thing that he talks about is this rotation movement, and Kevin demonstrates it well. It's a mix of this and this. When you watch Kevin, it looks like kind of like this. And I would encourage you to watch Kevin over me. I sometimes am consistent with this and sometimes not. But there's kind of two components as to why this rotation movement. One is positioning. It's going to depend on the spacing of your strings, the length of your fingers, the size of your hand, the size of your body, the size and structure of the guitar. But basically, if you think about it like this, when the hands are at rest, a lot of times the thumb is not really positioned directly. If all the fingers and thumb are at rest, they're not always positioned above their strings. So part of it is positioning. So I'm going to exaggerate, but if I'm going to play the A, so I'm going to do this P, I, M, I arpeggio. And if I'm playing the bass string with my thumb, at rest, you can see that at rest, I'm kind of almost above the G string or the D string. So I want to use some of this rotation movement that Kevin and Rene talk about to, remember it's this way and this way. So that I'm constantly positioning, and it's like you're kind of position the thumb, then pluck, then position fingers. It's almost like kind of like planting in a weird way, or how it reminds me of sequential planting, where it's like you position sequentially. Position for the thumb, and then you pluck, and then you position for the fingers, and then you play the fingers, and then you position for the thumb, and then you play. has a couple factors. One of them is positioning. One of them is kind of like shocks on a bike. If you think of a bike without shocks, it's going to absorb all the energy, whereas if you think of a bike with shocks, it's going to kind of move with the ground a little bit. And so rather than being stiff and tense, you can kind of just relax and move with the thumb and fingers a little bit. And it's invisible. I mean, if you don't know to look for it, you can't see me doing it right now, but I'm doing it. And you can kind of feel, while you're not doing an actual shift, there's just a little bit of movement in that contact point. It's that same kind of like skin stretching forward and backward that Rene talks about for the way he shifts when he says, you know, I do the Ramiro shifting for the right. And depending on the arpeggio pattern, this can really help, because if you look too, if I'm doing P-I-A-M, first I need to position for the thumb, then I need to position for the fingers, but I'm only positioned right now for I and A. If you look, M is almost like either to pluck the E string or even beyond it here. So I position for thumb, and then I position I and A, and then I play I and A, and then I position for M, and then I position for P. I'm exaggerating that motion, but you can see the rocking when you see me doing it. And I am sloppy because I am not Rene, and I am not at all warmed up today. It's a little unclear to me how much, if any, forearm rotation is involved. My guess is right now is you just do some of that engagement or tensing to keep the forearm from rotating. It may be like shocks on a bike where you let it move with the fingers a little bit. I don't know. So I'm not going to make a ruling on that. Just be mindful of your forearm rotation for now. I'm going to ask Rene at my next lesson what the answer to that question is. The other thing too is you want to be concerned with your presentation. So if you're doing this 4-note arpeggio, you want to remember that I is a little bit shorter than M. And so the way that you present with the shoulder to arm joint, whether it's forward or backwards or tilting, is depending on your spacing of your strings, the size of your guitar, the length and size of your fingers and hand, and it's going to look a little different from everybody. But point being, just as with intervals where you want to position things, you want to position also for the difference in length, because typically the middle is longer than the index. So like in rest stroke, if you want the index, when you tilt this way, it brings the pointer finger, the index finger, a little bit closer to the string and brings this a little bit further. But since the middle finger is longer, it kind of evens them out. Which is partly why in those older schools like Segovia and Ida Presti, where they're more rest stroke driven technique, you see a lot of that sort of tilting of the right hand. And that's pretty much everything for arpeggios.